Hello there. Welcome to my video. This is the third video in a series about the Viwoods AiPaper Mini, and this particular video is going to be focused on actually doing demonstrations and seeing how the AI tools in this device work. AI is really the central difference in this device versus other devices that have been on the market. We've never seen a level of AI integration that we see with this device. So we're going to explore what exactly that integration is, what the output of it is, and I'm going to do critiques and explain, at least from my perspective, how useful I think they are. So that's the purpose of this video. So we're starting to move away from just demonstrations of the device, which was the case in the first two videos of the series, and now we're moving more toward actually reviewing the device, and so that's what we'll start here. Now, one thing I do want to say is that this is a pre-production model. There's changes that are going on, and my contact at Viwoods, who provided me the device to review, did indicate that they were looking at kind of expanding the AI functionality. So you have to kind of take this review as a picture in time. And there will be improvements presumably in the future, but all I can review is the device as it stands today, and that's what we'll be doing. I don't have any speculation in terms of what those changes might be, but just know that that certainly has been mentioned as something by the manufacturer. So we'll see what that looks like when it comes around, but for now, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we've got. Actually, just before we do, let me explain one thing I forgot to mention. So basically, I've devised kind of a 3-level rating system for each of the AI functions, and it's like this. I'll give 1 star if the function doesn't seem to provide much value and doesn't seem very interesting. 1-star things would be like, you can remove them, and I'm not going to miss those things much at all. Then there's 2 stars. 2 stars are kind of interesting. There's something that's coming back in the query. It seems to add some value, but the utility may not be clear. Maybe in the right circumstances, it might make sense, but it's not something you're going to use particularly often. But again, interesting enough that it rises above the level of the 1-star queries, so I'm giving those 2 stars. 3 stars are queries that I feel like they're useful, they're interesting, and you could potentially see using those in a workflow. These are the actual elements of the device that are making the case for why AI integration might make sense. So the 3-star items are the ones that I really focus on and say, this is where the value add is in fact being put into play. So 2-star, going back to that for a second, is interesting, but not necessarily has application. 3-star brings it all together in a useful package. So that's my rating system that we'll be using throughout the video. Okay, so to demonstrate the AI features, I thought it would be best, instead of doing a top-down camera position, to go ahead and use the WLAN feature, where I'm basically casting through my web browser and showing that onto the screen. So I think it'll be easier to read what's going on and to be able to see what the output of these queries are. So hopefully that works well. We're going to start off with using the haptic button in the lower right corner of the device. It's the AI button. It's the button that can be used anywhere on the device, no matter where you're using it. And what will happen is a window will pop up on top of whatever you're doing, and then a chat GPT or a chatbot interface rather will then appear, and it will allow you to do either verbal or you could type in your query. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to hold the button for a couple seconds. The window will pop up. I'll let go of the button. I'll do my query, and then it's going to take about 12 seconds for it to wait and to time out, which is something I hope they do fix in future updates, because it is a long delay. Then it will send that information to the servers to translate, and then once it's translated, it will then bring back a response. So let's see that in action. So I'm holding the button down. Can you tell me what large language model you are? Okay, so now it's going to send it, convert it to text. And there it is. It's OpenAI's GPT-3. And you can see that with the logo in the chatbot interface was the OpenAI logo. So that's great. Let's go ahead and I'm going to use the circular button to the left of AiPaper with a plus in the center. I'm going to click on that to clear the history. The button next to it, by the way, is a recording of your chat history. But let's go ahead and do another query. How many teams were in the Premier League when it began in England? All right, sending it off to get translated. I've found that the verbal translations are very good. Okay, there's the answer. Of those teams, which one has the most losses in the Premier League? Okay, so it's sending it to get translated. And let's see what it is. Oh, West Bromwich Albion. Very interesting. And then you can go on. So it's just like a traditional chatbot interface. What you've noticed in the bottom of each box is there's both the option to copy the output, and then there's a share icon as well. Copying the output, and this is something I showed in my previous video, can be pasted in either the meeting, paper, or picking sections. You just create a text box, long press, and then a copy icon appears, and then you can paste into that box. If it turns out that there's more text than can fit on the screen, it will still fit in the box, but what you have to do is click on the box, and then you can scroll to see some of the text that doesn't fit, but it will all paste in. And then you have share options. We'll click on that. And those are the similar options that we covered in the previous video, and the output is a text document. And that'll be the same through all the AI queries that we do going forward. But this is basically the main AI function of the device, this chatbot interface. Really well designed. The fact that you can use it anywhere, so I can be in my notes, I can press the button if I have a query that I want to send, something I want to get a little bit of information on, and it will return it. If I click on the X to get rid of this, it goes back to whatever I was looking at. So it's very convenient, very well integrated. The AI button being on the lower right corner, you might think that that might accidentally trigger, but because it takes a few seconds for it to come up, I've never accidentally triggered that button. In fact, I've never accidentally triggered any of the 3 haptic buttons. So it works really well. And so overall, I'm going to give this 3 stars because it's perfect, it's useful, and it's really well integrated. The only caveat I have to that is that delay between finishing speaking and the time it'll send the query to the servers, being about 12 seconds, is a long delay. I hope they can find ways to shorten that, or maybe to just press the AI button to tell it you're stop talking, something where you don't have to have that long delay. But outside of that, it's very well implemented, and I think it's a really good start to our exploration of the AI features. Okay, so for our next stop, I'm in the Paper app. I'm in a notebook, and I've written a couple of queries here just to see what we can get back. So if I click on the AI button here on the menu bar on the left, there's a couple options. Regardless of which option I choose, it's going to apply to anything on the entire page. So let's go ahead and click on Analyze Content and see what we get back. It's thinking about it. As throughout this video, I'm going to keep everything running live so you can see exactly how long it takes. Okay, here we go. So actually, it did separate it out, which is nice. But for the most part, it's not really giving a lot of great information. One of the things that I think is questionable about this particular feature is that presumably, because these are your notes, you know what you wrote, or you know what you drew. And so to have the AI system then analyze it, I mean, it's telling you what you already knew, presumably. I guess there could be some off chance that it provides some sort of insight. But I don't think this is a particularly useful query. Now, there is one exception that I thought of, which is, well, what if you drew something? You're not a particularly good drawer. So maybe I'm trying to draw a bear, for example. And it doesn't come out like a bear, but it kind of looks familiar. Like, it looks like something. You could use AI, I guess, to analyze it, and then AI might return an interesting answer. And like, oh, okay, that's what that looks like. But that seems a little obscure to me. I'm going to give this 1 star. There's a little bit of potential for interesting information, but for the most part, I'm not quite sure what the value is. Now, you'll notice that on the top of the document, there's a little drop-down bar, and if I click on that, the other features that were available when we went into this window are available here. So I don't have to back out of the window in order to generate an article. I can go ahead and click on that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's see what happens. So it's thinking about it. Okay, so interesting. It took both questions and answered both, starting with the question about Arsenal. Actually, it starts off with an intro, which is kind of interesting. It talks a little bit about Arsenal. Arsenal's won the most games against Everton. Fantastic. Shout out to the Everton fans out there. I'm certainly not one of them, but it's been a tough go last couple of years, and you guys surviving relegation 2 years ago, I think, was pretty amazing. That was a cool game to watch, so I'm happy for you, but not a fan. And then sends a little bit of information about statistics, which is curious. And then it starts going to the cat breeds. There might be more. Let's see if I can scroll. Yeah, there's more information here. And so 40 to 70 distinct cat breeds. Curious. And then, and a conclusion which merges the two queries. Super interesting. Not sure what to think about that. But this is kind of interesting. I mean, it came back with information that was useful. The fact that there were 2 queries on the page kind of threw it for a loop, and it merged together in maybe not a useful way, but a fun way. If I had wanted just to focus on one question or the other, then I probably should have just had 1 query on the page as opposed to 2. But it was more interesting to do it this way, so that's why I did it. But let's go ahead and do another query and take a look at the generate article and see how we can potentially manipulate the query. So let's say do a brief history of Arsenal in 10 words. We'll go ahead and generate that article and see what we come up with. So the window pops up immediately, but it's going to think about it. Not bad. It didn't do it in 10 words. Oh, it thought I asked for 18. Okay. My writing was a little sloppy, but actually not too bad. So the reason why I'm showing this is that how you write your query can impact the results. And that's another reason why I kind of like this generate article feature. I think I'm going to give this 3 stars. It's a way to pull some useful information. I can control the query based on how I write it out. And as usual, I can, of course, copy the results into the notepad, or I can go ahead and share them. So pretty good stuff. Definite 3 stars. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this page. I'm going to demonstrate the third and last item from the menu bar, and that's the AI text conversion. So let's go ahead and click on that and see how that comes out. We know that the query it ran earlier was pretty much what we were looking for, so it's probably going to be fairly accurate, but let's go ahead and see what it actually spits out. And what team does Arsenal have the most wins against, and how many cat breeds are out in the world? Perfect. The voice activation, which we saw with the AI button, is nearly flawless. I can't recall any errors that I've had using that. Writing, sometimes there are some issues, but it's generally pretty good. I would say both the writing recognition as well as the audio recognition are really excellent. Maybe the audio is slightly better, but both are good. And of course, the handwriting recognition will be somewhat based on your handwriting. Mine's not particularly good, although I put a little bit more effort in these demos. But I think it's quite reasonable how well it translates. Okay, so before we leave the paper app, there's actually some additional AI functionality. It's not from the sidebar there, but it is from the lasso tool. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and we'll circle this first query, like so. And then we'll click on this AI button that pops up in the left side. So let's go ahead and do that. And we see there's 3 different things that pop up. There's explain, AI text conversion, and grammar and spelling. So explain is the same query as what we saw with the AI tool, but it was called, in that case, analyze content. And that's the thing I gave 1 star towards, so there's no point in looking at that. AI text conversion is also exactly the same, and that we gave 3 stars to, but there's nothing new there. What is new is grammar and spelling. So why don't we go ahead and click on that and see what that looks like. Okay, so they actually says there's some spelling errors. Let's see, I didn't realize there was a spelling in there. Okay, they say have was spelled wrong. And so it made that. So it made 1 correction to it, but not bad, actually. And I don't know if that's really accurate, though. So no, it didn't recognize the E, but if you look at my writing, the E was not well formed. So that's actually not a bad pickup. It did note that it couldn't tell it was an E, and looking at it, I can't tell it's an E either. So not bad. That's actually a fairly useful feature. And if I had a whole page of notes and I was interested in sending that out, after a meeting or what have you, I could use this grammar checker first. It could make the change, and I could zip it out potentially without having to make manual edits. That's a pretty neat feature. I'm going to give that one 3 stars as well. So that does conclude all the AI features in the paper app. Let's move on to the meeting app. Okay, so now we're in the meeting app, and I've gone ahead and used one of their templates to create a fake meeting. In this case, it's called a faux meeting. The place will be in Narnia, and the attendees are your mama. If you read the text, the content is the meeting was called to order and everyone was cranky. I stopped caring for a while, but my boss looked at me strictly, and I'm writing notes again. And then on the next page, now the meeting is ending, and we all just wasted a bunch of time, and it is important that we do not meet again. So let's go ahead and return to that first page. Let's click on the AI button and see what we get. So we have the option to do meeting minutes and to ask AI. Let's go ahead and click on that meeting minutes function and see what it makes of this bit of a mess of a meeting. Okay, so there it is. It's got the place right, it's got the attendee. And again, this is a great example of it reading the template as well as the writing and putting that together. And they just basically typed in the actual meeting minutes. However, they only did that for the first page. So this is useful in the sense that, okay, the meeting minutes are now typed out. I can share them. I can make a couple edits if necessary and then send them to everybody. That's useful, but it missed the second page of meeting minutes. And this is a fairly small screen. So the odds are that you're going to capture all your minutes on one page. It's not particularly good. So I'm going to give this 2 stars. It could get 3 if it had just added, that if it just done all the pages in the notebook and made it into one document, then that would be pretty good. And I'd give that 3. But as it stands, it's going to get 2 stars. Now let's go ahead and select that other AI feature, which we can't do here. So we'll go ahead and back out. We'll click on the system icon, and then we'll go ahead and ask AI and see what we get from that. So this is kind of interesting. So we're back into kind of that chatbot interface, and you can see that the document is attached, although it's only that first page. What's curious about this here, though, is that it is allowing me to basically send a message in addition to the minutes. So let's go ahead and do that and tell me, I've got the on-screen keyboard on it, how the meeting went. Did I spell it right? I sure did. Let's go ahead and get that going and see what it says. Get rid of that. It seems the meeting started with everyone feeling cranky. The note taker mentioned they stopped paying attention for a while, but felt the need to take notes again after receiving the strict look from their boss. Overall, it sounds like the atmosphere was tense and not very productive. You know, not bad, actually. Obviously, this is a very simple exercise, but there's some value to this response, and, you know, I don't know. I think it has potential. But again, it suffers from the fact that it's only analyzing the first page. It didn't analyze the second page. So I'm going to give this 2 stars as well. It's intriguing, it has some potential, but it's only telling part of the story. Okay, so one last thing here before we move on to the next application. There is a lasso functionality, so let's take a look at that. I'll go ahead and select that. I'll circle this top part like so. And then there's our AI button. So when I click on that, 3 options: explain, AI text conversion, grammar and spelling. These are all the same as we saw with the paper apps. There's no need to go through that here. So all the same ratings would apply. So we'll go ahead and move on to the Pickings app. Okay, so now we're in the Pickings app, and as you might recall from the previous video, there's 2 sections here. There's the Pickings section, which is kind of like a quick note or a sticky note, little notebooks. It's a simpler version of the note-taking app. And then there are these screenshots, and we can either do a crop picture, or we can do kind of an annotation where no matter what you're looking at, you can annotate on top of the screen and it's saved there. The AI features are different for each. So let's go ahead and go into the picking file, and we're going to go ahead and click on the AI button in the system tray. In this case, I just took an image of the home screen. So I'm going to go ahead and click that on. And there's 2 functions here, Ask AI and AI text conversion. Both of these we've actually already seen before, so there's actually nothing new than what we've seen. So let's go ahead and back out then and go into the screenshot section, in which there will be some new things to take a look at. Oops, I'm going to go ahead and click on this screenshot. So this is an image of the calculator app that I cropped. And if I go ahead and go to the bottom, you'll notice there's an AI button at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. 3 options: recognize content, brief summary, and ask AI. We've seen ask AI before, but recognize content and brief summary are new. So let's take a look. We're going to ask it to recognize content. And it's going to query the servers. Let's see what it comes back with. Taking a few seconds. It's thinking hard, wants to give a good answer. Okay, here we go. It recognizes it's a calculator interface, actually talks about some of the functions, which is interesting, and goes into a bit of detail. Okay, not bad. I don't know how useful this is, kind of similar to one of the initial AI functions we saw. I mean, if you take an image, you probably know what it is, but there's a chance that you have an image, you're curious about it, and AI could, in fact, give you some ideas as to what that image might be. So I think it's got some functionality. I don't think it's terrible, but I'm not sure how often you'd be using it. I'll give this 2 stars. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the next function, which is the brief summary. Let's go ahead and do that and see what we get back. And it's pretty much kind of giving a similar but more abbreviated version of what we saw before. So again, not bad. I'll give it the same stars for the same reason. So both of these functions, I would rate 2 stars. Some potential in certain situations, but generally hard to kind of see how that might be useful for most people. Okay, let's go ahead and move on then to the daily, or also known as the calendar app. Okay, so our focus turns to the calendar app. And you might recall from the previous video that under each date, you have the ability to write in tasks and notes, which I've done here. I've done kind of a demonstration of just some basic, very generic tasks. And there's an AI button, and the functions in the calendar app are not repeated throughout the rest of the device. There's actually 4 AI functions that we can test out. So let's go ahead and start. We can start with Organize, and we can then go to Daily Report here in the task menu. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Organize. Pardon me. Let it think about it, let it stew on it a little bit. Okay. And this is interesting. So it returned the tasks and then put it into 2 different categories. So it did a little bit of analysis based on that. For the most part, though, it's pretty much just returning what I wrote. So I don't think that's particularly useful. I suppose if you wanted to basically email the list out, then you could create this and then use the share function. But I'm going to give this kind of a 1 star. It feels a little bit, it's hard to imagine why you'd want to do that. I don't know if this adds a lot of value. But it is curious that it grouped the tasks together. So it has some interest. Let's go ahead and look at that other function then, which is the daily report. We'll click on that. Let's see what it's going to say about that. It's thinking. Okay. All right, so this is kind of interesting. It's kind of giving, I guess, a document with the expectation maybe that you would share it because it's got kind of this header, and then it basically translates each of the 6 items I had written. So I don't know, kind of interesting. I'm not super sure how useful this is. Normally when I'm doing to-do notes, for example, I'm doing them for myself. I'm checking them off when I'm done. Let's go ahead and check one off actually and see if that affects the query. So we'll go ahead and click on AI, do a daily report. Let's see how it takes those checks in. Okay, didn't seem to have done anything with those checks. Let's go back to the Organize and see if it recognizes those there, just out of curiosity. Okay. No. So in neither case did it indicate that it was checked off. Okay, curious. But both cases, I'm not sure what the value of these queries are. I mean, they're a little interesting, but I think they're both 1-star queries for sure. Let's go ahead and get out of this then and go into the notes section where we're going to have 2 other different options. So we'll click on the AI button. We can either polish the content or generate a story. So let's go ahead and polish the content and see what that does for us. Okay. All right. So it just changed the wording a little bit. Okay. Not bad. I don't know, again, how useful this is going to be. I mean, how often are you looking to kind of edit notes within a planner like this? Normally it's just for yourself. You know what you wrote. So, you know, it has some functionality, but I think I'm still going to give this 1 star. It just doesn't seem to add any real value, and it's not interesting enough for 2 stars. But let's go ahead and check on this generate a story and see what that gives us. And it's thinking about it. Okay, so here we've got a pretty long story. Let me scroll and see how far this goes. So it's pretty interesting. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but it certainly did put a lot of effort to generate this fictional story based on a very simple query. Kind of cool. I think this is definitely interesting enough to rise from a 1 star. It is kind of odd, though, the placement. I mean, this is the notes section in a planner. So, and you only have so much space to write your query, which we can see here at the bottom of the screen. I only used a couple lines, but I don't know. I think it brings enough interesting things to the table to be ranked at 2 stars, but I'm not sure it's particularly useful other than, you want to generate a story. But in theory, you could do that through the chatbot interface. So I don't know if you need to go here to do that. So yeah, I'll give it 2 stars. Not particularly practical, but interesting enough. Okay, and that's all that's in the Notes tab. Let's head over to the Documents section. Okay, so now we turn to what's called the Learning app, which I just refer to as the Documents app. And this is basically just the repository where you can put EPUBs and PDFs and you can do annotations. But there's also AI features as well. And the 3 AI features here are unique to this particular app. We're currently in the EPUB file for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And we can see the AI icon at the top of the screen. So let's click on that. 3 options: main points, core idea, and related works. Let's go ahead and see what the main points are and see what comes back. And there they are. Now, much like our other queries, this is not looking at the entire document. This is only looking at the current page. Although I think in this case, that's much more reasonable. In the case of the meeting notes, you would expect to have multiple pages and that's all in one meeting. But in this particular case, it's a very large document. It would take a lot of resources to run an AI query on the entire document. So to limit on 1 page to me is quite reasonable. And the content that's here is kind of interesting. I can see some potential here. So I'm going to give this query 2 stars. It's not worthless. If you have a page and you want a different interpretation of what you're reading, this would be a way to do that. Maybe this is not something you would necessarily use that often, but it's intriguing enough. I think it deserves 2 stars. Let's take a look at the next one, which is the core idea. This should be interesting because we're going to have to summarize the text. So let's see how it does on that. Okay, and it's kind of similar to the previous query, but just kind of laid out a little differently. Yeah, I get they do have kind of these headers for the different sections. Yeah, kind of the same thing. I think there's some value here. It's kind of interesting what the query has basically said about this particular passage. I don't know how useful that is, but it's better than 1 star. It's interesting enough. I'm going to give this 2 stars. Let's go ahead and look at the last one, which is the related works. This should be interesting. Let's see what it will do. Although presumably, again, it's only going to be reading this 1 page. So it's going to do a related work on this one particular passage. Okay, so here's the results. Oh, well, they recognized it's from Frankenstein. Okay. And then they talk about the general themes of the novel. And really talking more, it's not so much related works, is it? This is really more about that novel itself. So, but it's not bad. It's a fairly accurate, albeit pithy, review of the book. Well, it's not a review, but an overview of the book. Yeah, 2 stars. I mean, it's not necessarily something that I would find myself using a lot, but it is kind of interesting. It does, it's fairly accurate. It did recognize the section. So yeah, I think that's a fair 2-star query. Okay, one thing that I neglected to cover in my previous video was line perfection. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate that here as we're projecting onto the computer. So what line perfection is a way that I can actually draw a line or a shape, and then I can hold it and it will make it look nicer. So let's kind of show that in action. So I'm going to draw a little bit of a wobbly line, and then I'm going to hold it, and it becomes a solid line. Similarly with a square, we can kind of hold it, and becomes a nicer square, kind of a square. We'll do a little oval here, and then so on. One thing that you can do in addition to this is if you hold on to the object after it converts into kind of a nicer line, you can actually manipulate it. So let's do that with the line. We'll go ahead and draw that, make it nice, and now I can move it around and change its length as well. Let's go ahead and do that with a square. There we go. And then we can turn it, make it larger, and make it smaller. One other thing that we can do is that at the end of the shape converting, if I use my finger to tap the screen while I'm still holding on to the object, it will snap to the orientation of the device. So let's go ahead and try that with a square. So I'm going to make a little crooked square, let it convert, and then tap, and see how it automatically shifted into place. Let's do something similar for a circle. We'll tap, and it becomes a nicer circle. So some pretty good drawing tools that aren't obvious at a glance. There's no setting on the bar that would indicate this, but this is available to you. You just have to draw your shape, and then you can manipulate it accordingly. Once the shape is drawn, however, there is no editing feature on the shape itself. So you kind of need to get it right before you remove your stylus from the screen. Okay, so there you have it. So now that we've done this review, what are my general thoughts about how AI was integrated into the device? Well, you surely noticed that a lot of AI features I gave 1 or 2 stars to. There were a lot of 2-star AI features. In fact, that was probably the most prominent rating that I gave. So they're interesting, and I found them a lot of fun actually to use and explore. But do those ultimately add value? Probably not. But having said that, there were a few areas where I did give 3 stars to. There were a number of queries in the paper or note-taking app that I gave 3 stars to. And of course, the AI button itself with the chatbot window, I also gave 3 stars to. And potentially, if they can take that meeting minutes and have it review all pages, that could rise to 3 stars at some point, although currently it doesn't. So right now, it's focused in the paper area and the AI button that brings up the chatbot app. So is that enough to actually make a difference? Actually, I think it is. The fact that the AI button is available anywhere you want means you have the most powerful query available to you in any setting. So it won't necessarily do that analysis of a particular document, but if you're looking to research information, for example, and you're okay with a verbal query or typewritten into the chatbot, it's there at a fingertip in a way that no other device can do. And then the integrated features in the paper app are pretty well done, and that's perfect because the core of the device is going to be the note-taking app. So while I certainly see a lot of AI functionality that maybe isn't necessary or is interesting but not particularly useful, I think it does enough to really make a case for itself around this AI integration. So that's my take on it. I'm going to reflect a little bit more on this and come up with some use cases that I think that might be able to take advantage of those AI apps. But the fundamental structure and integration of the AI is well done enough in the right places that it does make sense and it does add value. That's my overall sense anyway. All right, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any questions about anything, please pop those into the comments as well. I'll respond to many of those, and I look forward to that. And then hold on now for the final video that will be the culmination of all the work I've done around the device. There will be probably a delay in getting that out because there are some bugs, and I've talked about this in the previous video, that need to be ironed out, and that I know that Viwoods is working on. In fact, I've sent the list to them. So if they can iron those out, I would prefer to do my review after that. So I'm going to give them some time to make those fixes. I actually think that everything I've sent to them is totally fixable. I see no reason why the device won't be able to address most, if not all of them. So I'm just going to give some time for that process to play out. And once it does, or it seems to have reached a point where I don't think any subsequent changes will make a difference, then we'll go ahead and release that final video. So I don't have an ETA on that at this time. Viwoods is committed to doing weekly updates on the device, so it could be that we'll see these things addressed fairly soon, in which case the review will come out soon, or it might take a few weeks to a month. I'm not particularly picky. I'm going to give them a chance to address them because they've already shown a pattern of being able to address some of the bugs I've seen previously, so they certainly have earned the right in my mind to be able to address these, and then we'll get that final review out. But for now, as it relates to the AI tools, I certainly see a lot of potential there. All right, until next time, I will see you then.